So we're reading Water by Dr. Batman Gillies. We're on chapter 11, page number 147 of the PDF.
Depression and chronic fatigue syndrome. As mentioned, the brain uses a great deal of electrical energy that is manufactured by the water drive of the energy generating pumps. With dehydration, the level of energy generation in the brain is decreased. The ATP pool of energy becomes gradually depleted, more at some sites of activity than others. Many silent functions of the brain that depend on hydroelectric energy become inefficient. We recognize this inadequacy of function and call it depression.
So again, the brain gets energy from two places. One is from the hydroelectricity generated by the water, which are turning the turbines, which are there in the cellular structures. And the other is through ATP, which is processed through food, right? Now, if dehydration takes place, the hydroelectricity is less. The ATP starts getting consumed, which is available to the brain. And once that is also depleted, it can actually cause a depletion in the functioning of the brain. If the brain is not functioning properly, that means that it can cause depression.
To the human body, caffeine is very much like the booster system in an engine. In the same way, a booster system burns fuel at a faster but inefficient rate to propel a car or plane at an exaggerated speed. So caffeine forces an increase in consumption of ATP.
So again, when we are having caffeine, we start getting revved up, right? Now, Joe McMonaghan says in one of his books that when they wanted to stress someone out, they used to make them have 3 cups of coffee, right? It revs up the engine and then ultimately it leads to stress. Over here, what he's saying is that if you have coffee, it starts the consumption of ATP at a faster rate. Now, if ATP is consumed at a faster rate, ultimately it will lead to a depletion. So you'll get a burst of energy, but then you'll get depleted after that.
Caffeine in coffee, tea, and other beverages forces an excess in expenditure of ATP energy by the brain. The brain always keeps some energy in reserve for emergency use, such as the energy surge of the last few miles of a marathon runner. Caffeine also dehydrates the body. 1 cup of coffee or tea or a glass of an alcoholic drink produces more urine than the actual ingested volume of liquid of any of the beverages. On top of that, by trying to cool down the body temperature to adjust for the hot tea or coffee, more water is lost in the form of perspiration. Tea addicts are always thirsty, but they continue to drink tea.
So again, basically all these drinks, right, that we have, soft drinks, tea, coffee, they actually lead to dehydration. So if you're drinking, let us say 1 glass of a soft drink, you have to drink 10 glasses of water to compensate for the drinking of that 1 glass of a soft drink. The same with tea and coffee.
Normally, low levels of ATP give a lasting and constant signal of a lowered level of energy. This signal of a low battery reading puts the system on guard and does not permit the overuse of the ATP energy pool in the cell. In this way, each cell will have a fatigue signal of its own. It will take far stronger stimulus than before to fire up these fatigued cells. Consequently, the conscious mind is deprived of the possibility of accessing the cell's ATP energy pool and will function at a less efficient level. Even the volition to perform a function is lost.
So again, when a person is depressed, right, low energy, doesn't want to do anything. So again, for depression also, technically speaking, if you're looking at what we are looking at here, drinking water is the first thing that a person in depression must start doing. increase water intake so that the energy levels in the brain start to get boosted again.
It should be remembered that there is a time gap between energy expenditure from the ATP pool and the remanufacture of the spent energy. So the brain will operate at less than normal efficiency or at a depressed level for some time.
So again, if the hydroelectricity is not there and the ATP pool has got depleted, naturally there will be fatigue syndromes in the brain, an inability to do any action, to perform any action, and basically you will be not performing at your top capabilities.
It seems that caffeine and other chemicals, stimulants, alter the level at which spent ATP registers its signals of lower battery reading. Eventually, these stimulants may not be able to overcome the inhibitory influence of ATP loss. There may even come a time when almost no ATP is left to tap into for outside work.
So again, as we start stressing ourselves, right, we are using up the energy within the system, which can lead to a total collapse, right? Even by taking stimulants, now you cannot get up. The system will just not move, which is, I mean, you've flattened yourself out, right? It's a total washout. It's not a nice place to be in.
Now, all a cell can do is stop almost most of its functions in order to survive. More and more, the body loses its ability to use brain energy to do mental or physical work, and the person becomes passive in a vegetative mode of social behavior. What began as a depression now becomes a generalized fatigue.
So again, people in depression, you will find they have no energy, right? They just can't move. So again, it's all one is leading to the other.
Once you add the problems of chronic dehydration to mental fatigue, a conglomerate of many different symptom producing states with a general label of chronic fatigue syndrome, CFS, is born.
So what is the basis of chronic fatigue syndrome? It is basically the loss of energy in the cells of the brain, not enough energy available in the brain to perform the functions that are required to be performed.
CFS is a manufactured label to describe a series of disparate symptoms and signs. In different parts of the world, the same series of conditions are labeled post-viral fatigue syndrome, neuromyasthenia, myalgic neuroencephalomyelitis, tongue-twisting labels that mean little, until it was shown to be an inaccurate assumption. It was thought that CFS was caused by the Epstein-Barr virus.
So something that was basically caused due to dehydration was given that a virus was causing it. So now you're going to be treating the virus instead of treating the dehydration.
There is a clear relationship between the stresses associated with lifestyle trends that result in an upheaval in the metabolic and physiological balance of the body and the condition known as CFS. For those persons who have a strong leaning towards the belief that CFS is a viral disease, I recommend reading the section on lupus in my book ABC of Asthma, Allergies and Lupus. I described how initial dehydration is responsible for fragmentation of the DNA of some cells into small particles that have been classified as viruses.
This is amazing. Yeah. Our own DNA, because it's been broken up, gets classified as viruses because people cannot identify that it is a piece of the DNA.
We should never forget that the body is a conglomerate of chemical systems. It is able to build new tissue or break up already formed structures as a means of recycling the raw materials. Other than the brain, no part of the body is sacrosanct Even muscle tissue is broken down to tap into its stored amino acid pool.
So again, the body will eat itself in order to survive, right? The brain has priority over all the energy that is available in the body system. But if energy is required, breakdown of any organ, any muscle, any tissue in the body can take place to allow for survival.
In continuous stressful encounters and life patterns, this is exactly what happens, whether the stress is caused by an emotional experience or by fighting a viral infection. Dehydration, stress, and dieting for aesthetic value without the benefits of exercise, in my opinion, must be assumed to be the root cause of CFS, particularly if pick me up fluids such as coffee or alcohol are taken as substitutes for the water needs of the body.
So again, many times when people are dieting, right, they will drink coffee, they will drink more coffee because this stresses them out, and then the energy gets depleted, the muscle tissues start to get eaten up, and then they feel that they are thin, right? Now, if the balance is not maintained in your diet, in your exercise, and the other things that you're doing in life, automatically it's going to cause a lot of problems.
One of the major needs of the body is salt. In dehydration and dieting that excludes salt intake, the body will become salt depleted. Salt is essential for muscle and nerve activity.
So again, when you get cramps, right, it is a clear indication of either calcium loss or salt loss. There's less salt in the system. So salt is extremely important. You'll see that in the wilderness, many of the animals also, they go, and wherever salt is found, they'll go and lick the rocks. So even in zoos, etc., these rocks which have a salt content are placed in the enclosures where the animals are living, so that the animals can go and lick the salt. So again, salt is very important for us.
In hot climates, when too much sweating causes salt deficiency, one of the symptoms often seen is a lack of energy to undertake any form of activity. Another symptom is muscle aches and cramps. Persons suffering from CFS should test increasing their salt intake at the same time as they increase their water intake. Naturally, with total exclusion of caffeine containing pick me ups. They have to allow some time for the buildup of their ATP reserves and full recovery of the delivery systems in the nerve fibers.
So again, if you're feeling that syndrome of fatigue syndrome, then you need to increase your water intake and your salt intake. And of course, not drink caffeine induced stuff and also alcohol.
Dry and burning eyes. Tear production for the normal functions of the eye is absolutely essential. In some people, this function is deficient and the eyes feel a burning sensation. Much blinking may take place to promote circulation to the tear glands. If this is ineffective, the eyes will be forced to shut to prevent water loss by evaporation. In some people, like myself, who may have had Bell's palsy, an obstruction of the facial nerve that also causes paralysis of face muscles on that side, tear formation in one eye often becomes affected. The eye on the side of the paralysis will become drier than the other. Even when the muscles have partially recovered, it is my personal experience that even if rubbing the eye does not promote tear formation and wetting of the eye, 2 glasses of water alleviates the condition fairly promptly.
This is called dry eye syndrome, and it's extremely painful, let me tell you. If enough water is not there in the eyes, it can become really, really painful.
The burning and pain should disappear in minutes. Artificial tears or frequent washing of the face and letting water get into the eyes will also help. Higher blood cholesterol. Everyone is now conscious of raised cholesterol as a marker of potential diseases of the heart and brain. The consequences of clogged arteries. In 1987, at an international gathering of cancer research, scientists in Greece, I exposed the scientific reason why increased cholesterol production in the body is a direct consequence of chronic dehydration. We have to assume that the genetic structure of each cell empowers it to act independently if environmental conditions are not to its advantage.
This is a very vital part, right? Every cell in our body has ability to run itself independently. And like we want to survive, each and every cell also wants to survive. So what the cell will do, it will do according to the environment that it is in. So one of the main causes of cancer is that the environment in which the cell is there is not proper, right? It's not normal. So the cell needs to adjust its for its own survival to the environment. So very clearly he says that each cell empowers it to act independently if environmental conditions are not to its advantage. So every cell will do its best to survive in the environment that it is finding itself in.
The cells of the human body have the same capability as bacteria to adapt to their environment by altering their membrane structure. Similarly, human body cells alter the cholesterol content of their membranes to prevent the uncontrolled seepage of water in or out of their inner domains. Normally, water is meant to seep into the cell at a slow but exact rate.
So again, to protect water loss, again, buildup of cholesterol can take place.
Cells also possess a mechanism for getting rid of excess water. However, if the cell water has to be kept inside because its environment is becoming comparatively dry, the cell membrane has to be sealed off. Cholesterol deposits within the structure of the membrane carry out the process of sealing off the membrane. The very pores that allow water to diffuse through get sealed off.
So naturally, if the membrane is sealed, neither can water get out nor water get in, right? So then that again causes issues.
Normally, when food is eaten, water and enzymes have to be poured into the stomach and intestines. The enzymes break the food particles into their smaller building blocks by inserting one molecule of water at each of the amino acids, many points of bondage that make up the protein structure and mass. Free water is used up to allow this action to take place. The result is that the body has less water and more soluble solid matter that needs to be transported in the now comparatively water depleted blood and lymph circulation.
So again, to digest the food, water is required.
The result of this digestive process is concentrated blood that leaves the intestines and goes through the liver. In the liver, some of this food load is taken away from the blood, and the balance is poured into the heart at the right side. At this right heart entrance, the lymph from the intestine also pours into the blood. The first place that this concentrated and now circulating blood visits is the lung tissue. Here, more water in the form of vapor is lost from the circulating blood during the breathing process. Now this concentrated blood is brought to the left side of the heart and pumped out. It goes to the arteries that feed the heart itself, then to the arteries of the brain, and then to the main body artery called the aorta. When this concentrated blood reaches the brain centers that deal with the osmotic regulation of the body, They signal the conscious mind that the body is short of water. The alarm for thirst develops, and the person feels the urge to drink water.
So again, the process of how the thirst signal is generated. But as we have read previously, the thirst signal can be often confused with the hunger signal.
There is a fairly long time gap between the exposure of the liver cells and the cell lining of the arteries to the concentrated blood and the time water is taken into the body. The time gap of water intake after food and the dehydrating influence of concentrated blood is sufficient to cause a cholesterol amassing and generating activity in those cells that come in contact with the concentrated blood, such as the liver and the lining of the arteries. In time, a physiological pathway for the manufacture and deposit of cholesterol in the lining of the blood vessels will occur. The only way the cells that cannot form cholesterol can protect themselves is to pick up cholesterol from the circulation and deposit it in their membranes.
So again, basically the cells, they take away the cholesterol from the blood circulating and keep building it up. That's how plaque develops, right? That's how concentrated, like if the wall of a artery or a vein is affected, it will be sealed by the cholesterol, right? And if the cholesterol is there, it keeps adding more cholesterol. That is how the arteries and the veins start getting blocked in the system.
Raised cholesterol is a sign that the cells of the body have developed a defense mechanism against the stronger osmotic forces of blood. The concentrated blood would normally keep drawing water out through the cell membranes.
So again, if the blood is short of water, it will extract it from anywhere in the body system. So naturally, the cells want to protect themselves. So that's why again the cholesterol gets formed.
Cholesterol is a natural sort of waterproof clay that, when poured in the gaps of the cell membrane, helps keep the membrane's architecture intact and prevents excess water loss. In chronic dehydration, additional amounts of cholesterol will continue to be produced by the liver cells and poured into the circulation for the common use of all cells that do not possess the power to manufacture their own. The additional cholesterol will also make the cell wall impervious to the passage of water that naturally takes place in a normally well hydrated cell.
So again, water can't go out, but it can't come in either.
To prevent excess cholesterol deposits by the cells lining the arteries and the liver, you need to drink regularly an ample amount of water a half hour before food intake. By this action, the cells of the body will become well hydrated before confronting the concentrated blood after food intake. There will also be enough water for the processes of digestion and respiration without needing to tap into the water held inside the cells lining the blood vessels.
So great, right? We need to drink 2 glasses of water half an hour before our meal.
After a period of regulating daily water intake so that the cells gradually become fully hydrated, the cholesterol defense system will be required less and its production will decrease. In light of this information, the range of normal blood cholesterol will probably prove to be far less than the values quoted at present. It is now becoming apparent that effective reduction of cholesterol levels in the circulating blood could promote a clearing of already formed deposits.
So again, if there's a blockage due to cholesterol, if we hydrate properly, then there is no reason for that accumulation to be there, and automatically it will start getting reduced.
I had occasion to advise a man in his early 40s whose angiogram had revealed partial blockage of his coronary arteries. The blockage was such that he had developed chest pains. I advised him not to have bypass surgery without first trying a conservative treatment for his condition. He agreed to adjust his daily water intake and to begin by taking 2 glasses, just under 1 pint, of water exactly half an hour before each meal. I advised him to walk 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening, to start with 20 to 30 minutes at the beginning, increasing gradually to 1 hour.
So we've read before that the energy or the system generated by the act of walking lasts for about 12 hours, right? The serotonin, etc., which is produced, it lasts for 12 hours. So that's why you need to walk every 12 hours.
I explained that research has shown that the hormone sensitive fat digesting enzymes become activated after the first hour of walking and remain active for 12 hours. The reason for the twice daily walk was the need to activate the fat burning enzyme on a regular basis and for its recognized cumulative action. 3 months later, the man went to one of the famous centers in Houston for a final checkup and an assessment of his need for bypass surgery. His new angiogram showed no sign of the previous blockage. He no longer needed surgery.
So again, natural means or using of natural methods of healing can be very, very powerful.
Coronary heart disease. The basics of this condition are explained in the above section on cholesterol formation and its deposit in the coronary arteries. Not much more can be added on this topic if we also take into consideration that another basic cause of diseases of the heart is continued hypertension and the shearing force of concentrated circulating blood, then the application of the same information will explain the root cause of coronary heart disease and brain damage and strokes.
So what does this imply? That today when you have high blood pressure, the blood is gushing at a higher pressure and moving faster. So that causes a shearing in the arteries and in the veins. When there's a shearing in the arteries and veins, they need to be patched up. That is patched up using cholesterol. And as you patch up with cholesterol, more cholesterol keeps getting added to that and ultimately will lead to a blockage of the vein, right? And that leads to heart disease, brain damage, as well as strokes.
It should be remembered that this information applies to all cells in each organ. When there is dehydration, all cells in all organs feel the problem, except some feel it more than others, until an emergency water infusion system begins to hydrate the more essential cells. The heart is not exempt from the problems associated with dehydration. It becomes sufficiently incapacitated to begin showing failure. Often the process begins with a spasm and then permanent obstruction of a small artery. The initial spasm causes pain. If at that very moment water is taken, the spasm will subside and the permanent obstruction of the artery may not be the outcome. In any case, water is immediately more essential to the patient than any other medication. It will at least reduce the extent of the damage. High blood cholesterol can also be an indicator of bone density loss. For more information, read the sections High Blood Cholesterol and Osteoporosis.
So again, cholesterol, if cholesterol is too much, then it could cause bone density loss.
Hot flashes. As I have explained, the nerve sensors of the face receive the same attention for their circulation as do the cells of the brain because they are directly involved with information gathering. At their brain side, they are connected to the serotonin regulated nerve system that at the same time has a regulatory role in the hormonal balance of the body. The level of tryptophan and serotonin activity in the body is directly influenced by the regulatory role of water. Because of the age-dependent loss of thirst sensation and the establishment of persistent dehydration, at some point or the other in the life of any individual, the hormonal balance of the body will automatically become affected by the same dehydration. In women, this hormonal imbalance will eventually lead to symptom-producing menopause and its hallmark of hot flashes.
Again, hot flashes are the result of dehydration.
Historically, some women are known for having given birth to a child when they were in their 70s. It is therefore feasible that there is no hard and fast rule to the age in which menopause is established. With the right lifestyle and balanced nutrition, it may be possible to delay menopause and alleviate its symptoms. To treat hot flashes, you need to hydrate the body well. You need to take a balanced amino acid diet that enhances the serotonin activity of the brain. You also need to take vitamin B6 as a supplement. Vitamin B6 is directly involved in the conversion of the amino acids tryptophan to serotonin, melatonin, tryptamine, and indolemine, tyrosine to dopa, dopamine, noradrenaline, and adrenaline, histidine to histamine. These neurotransmitters are vital for balancing the hormonal functions of the body as well as its water intake regulation. Dehydrated people are all vitamin B6 and zinc deficient. The addition of 100 milligrams of B6 to your daily diet will prevent hot flashes and alleviate PMS. This prudent precaution will also correct a range of other problems too extensive to discuss here.
So again, zinc is also a very important trace mineral, which is required by the body to work itself, right? I think there are some 38 or 39 trace minerals that we actually need.
Gout. When the body begins to collect uric acid and this substance is seen in some of the joints of the body at the same time as there is joint pain, this condition is called gout. Uric acid is a product of incomplete protein metabolism. It seems to be associated with the advanced complications of dehydration. It has been my clinical experience that increased water intake to the point that the urine is always free of color will avert attacks of gout pain. It is my view that formation of uric acid crystals and their collection in the joints is a direct result of chronic dehydration.
So anywhere that there is pain in the body, right, it totally indicates dehydration. So increasing hydration is a very important mechanism by which we can actually manage pain. And of course, if you are having adequate water, it helps in the detoxification of the body also, right? The toxics which get accumulated in various places in the body are actually the cause of the pain. So if we can increase hydration, most of the pain that we have will automatically get taken care of.
Kidney stones. Inadequate water intake and urine concentration are assumed to be responsible for the formation of uric acid and calcium deposits in the renal tissue. Once a primary crystal of these elements has formed, new deposits are made and larger pieces develop until they can become large enough to cause obstruction. Urinary infection will promote stone formation. If kidney stones are formed and passed, realize that you are suffering from a long-term effect of dehydration. The urine should never have become so concentrated as to cause the formation of the initial crystal seeds, which can grow into large stones within the kidneys.
So again, it's like a pearl, right? A small speck of sand goes into the oyster, and over a period, layer over layer over layer over layer over layer starts to form, which forms the pearl. In the same way, in the kidney, a small speck of that uric acid is formed, and then it starts accumulating, and makes a big stone, which then can cause the blocks in the arteries.
Skin and dehydration. In a dehydrated state of the body, the first site for establishing water conservation is the skin. Skin has the ability to perspire or sweat to cool and regulate body temperature. If there is dehydration, the water reserves in the skin may be used up without being replaced at the same rate as the water is lost. Thus, dehydration is a primary factor in the production of dry and lusterless skin. 1. The skin loses moisture and becomes dry and prune-like. 2. There is less capillary circulation to the skin area to give it the healthy color it should have. To promote a healthier skin, adequate water intake is essential.
So again, to maintain, you see, the suppleness of the skin is dependent on the hydration of the skin. If there is no hydration, you see, we are applying artificial hydrators like moisturizers and all that on the skin, which ultimately can result in causes which are not good for the skin, because the skin loses its ability to hydrate itself, right? So you have to take adequate water intake so that that water goes to the skin automatically, and you don't have to apply artificial moisturizers.
Human skin is the tissue that houses the inner workings of the body. Its cells need water all the time. They are exposed to the environment and lose water through surface evaporation, perspiration, and sweating. Three different rates of water loss from the skin surface. If water does not reach the skin from the circulation at its base, the rate of skin repair will decrease and dehydrated cells will cover the body. This is one of the reasons why you often see young women with their skins already aged beyond the years, why you see middle-aged women with deep furrows, crow's feet all over their faces. The face is most exposed to wind and the sun's rays, elements that enhance water loss from the skin surface. Men have coarser skin than women, which is why men's skin does not show its damage from dehydration as readily as women's skin. Men have another advantage. In order to make facial hair grow, male hormones bring more circulation to the skin of the face. Nonetheless, persistent dehydration does produce rough and furrowed skin in men's faces too.
So again, dehydration can cause skin issues.
The ultimate in dehydration produced skin problems is scleroderma. The skin becomes atrophied and thin or scaly like an alligator's hide. In its early stages of scleroderma, the skin begins to resemble a crocodile's exposed areas of the skin. Arms, knees, shins, hands, and feet are first to show the sign of the disease. The skin becomes fibrous, thick, and scaly. At later stages, the skin becomes very thin and almost shrink wraps the anatomical parts under it. When it affects the face, it can disfigure the nose, mouth, and eyes, as if the person is wearing a pale, shiny mask. The condition is very painful as well. The good news is that at its early phase, scleroderma can be reversed by increased water intake. I have seen the change back to normal skin in a young woman who was ecstatic with the outcome. She had been dreading the progress of her seemingly incurable, crippling problem. What amazes me is the number of ways the human body can manifest dehydration and how we in medicine have never understood the missing role of water in the conditions we have labeled diseases. The most common irritant to the skin is the detergent residue on washed clothes that are not well rinsed. The detergent can dissolve in sweat and cause contact dermatitis and even hives. Always double rinse anything you wash.
So again, washing clothes, soap, again is not a good idea.
Osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is normally recognized in the sixth decade of life, although it often starts in the body 15 to 20 years earlier. It occurs in both sexes and in all population groups. The total bone mass seems to decrease. It seems that the rate of bone resorption exceeds the rate of bone formation. Consequently, bone consistency and volume begin to decline. No one knows why osteoporosis occurs as we age. What I am about to discuss is my view. It is new and not necessarily subscribed to by others in the field of scientific research. By linking osteoporosis to chronic dehydration and a gradual rise in cholesterol levels of the body, I am sure I will incur the wrath of many of my colleagues who are looking at the condition through solutes directed research. Be that as it may, the following is my scientific belief and worthy of being exposed. Should my views prevail, the solution to osteoporosis will become simple. It will be a matter of prevention, 9/10 of any sensible cure. To expose the relationship between osteoporosis and dehydration, we need to understand how bone formation takes place in the human body. As an example, and depending on the availability of raw materials at a construction site, the use of concrete for the building of the skeleton of a building seems to be the most practical, long lasting, and economical method. If sand, gravel, and cement are locally produced, water is the only other necessary element to mix these components and the interwoven steel rods, which act as internal trusses for the cement to hold onto, as well as providing the rigidity needed for any durable building construction. Exactly the same principle is employed in the manufacture of skeletal bones.
So there's a lot of water in the bones also.
The architecture of dense bones employs myriad interwoven collagen fibers. Single fibers are anchored together and woven into a three-ply band. The woven bands are laid side by side and anchored together. It seems these thicker rope-like structures are now interwoven in such a way that whole zones or gaps are created for the deposit of a number of different calcium and sodium crystals. While the elastic collagen fibers provide the inner scaffolding for the calcium itself establishes the necessary rigidity for the bone to become weight bearing. Also, much of the 24% deposit of sodium in the body, along with the other minerals such as magnesium that are not dissolved in extracellular fluid, is stored as crystals in the body. Thus, bone formation depends on calcium, sodium, and to a lesser degree, other mineral deposits.
So again, the bone structure, the skeletal system is a storehouse of a lot of ingredients that are required for us to live a good life.
Now that we are discussing sodium, let us recognize an important fact: sodium and its attached chloride or bicarbonate constitute 90% of all the solids dissolved in the fluid surrounding the cells of the body. Thus, sodium is the most important ingredient for the maintenance of extracellular fluid volume. 24% of all the sodium in the body seems to be in a solid and crystalline form, mainly stored in the bones. The stored sodium in the bone must be assumed to compose the sodium reserves of the body, at the same time as it is employed for bone crystallization and rendering it hard. Thus, sodium in its own right serves an important function in the process of bone formation. Sodium shortage in the body, now that we understand its role in bone formation, may be a contributing factor in the establishment of osteoporosis. A sodium-free diet and the long-term use of diuretics may be a contributory factor in the establishment of osteoporosis. Collagen fibers are manufactured from amino acids that are connected in a linear fashion. The amino acid pool of the body seems to regulate the manufacture of these fibers. These fibrous strands are protected from being enzymatically broken and if they are deeply embedded in the calcium deposits. As soon as the calcium is removed from around the fibers, the enzymatic breakdown and the re-entry of their amino acid components into the amino acid pool becomes possible. This is how bone formation of the body has to do a balancing act between bone construction and bone breakdown. The tip of balance in the direction of one or the other state determines whether bone becomes thicker and more solid or weak and lighter in construction. How does bone resorption takes place? How is it related to dehydration? There are many different factors involved in bringing about bone resorption to the point of causing osteoporosis. I will not get involved in the variety of conditions that have bone resorption as the indirect consequence. I will concentrate on the possible direct relationship of dehydration to osteoporosis. Remember that there is normally a time gap between the exposure of a disease process and the initiating factors that began the process. In the case of the onset of chronic dehydration and its consequence of osteoporosis, my opinion is there may be a gap of 1 to 3 decades.
So again, we have to be very careful, right? It's a slow process. It just eats into the system. So if you've not been hydrating properly through your life, it can lead to osteoporosis. That's why osteoporosis generally happens towards the end of the life, right? At 50s or 60s.
It is my understanding that the very gradual loss of thirst sensation, the primary cause for the establishment of chronic dehydration, begins after the third decade of life, while the establishment of osteoporosis is mostly seen during the sixth decade of life. Thus, the tip of balance in favor of gradual and incipient bone resorption becomes established over the span of many years. Inactivity and disuse of the bone structure accentuate the rate of osteoporosis, while physical activity and the full use of the bones favor the laying down of calcium deposits and strengthening the frame of the bones. One of the main factors for the establishment of osteoporosis is the process of bone breakdown, osteolysis, that is brought about by prostaglandin E, PGE, as we know. PGE is a subordinate that routinely becomes active at the command of the neurotransmitter histamine. Bone marrow has an abundance of mast cells that manufacture histamine. The consequence of the prolonged activation of PGE by histamine is tapping into the calcium reserves by means of the breakdown of bone, osteolysis, and the removal of calcium from the bone deposits. The removal of calcium exposes the collagen for ultimate breakdown. In this way, dehydration that commissions histamine into activity will produce the consequent osteoporosis in the bone structures of the body. Osteoporosis is the negative outcome between the rate of bone formation and osteolysis. The only way to decommission histamine and prevent the bone resorption that is associated with dehydration is to adequately increase daily water intake to no less than 8 glasses of water, 8 ounces each, You also need sufficient exercise to tip the balance in favor of bone formation. Exercise has many other beneficial effects. Of course, not only does it cause strengthening of the bone itself as well as its joints and its muscle connections, but it also promotes better circulation. It opens and creates a more extensive capillary bed and builds a larger blood pool to draw on when the body is in need of more water and raw materials. This is why well exercised people are able to endure hardship and stress with fewer detrimental effects. An adequate and balanced protein diet is also essential to maintain the amino acid pool that ultimately determines the rate of manufacture of different collagen fibers. Cancer formation. In September 1987, I was asked to deliver the guest lecture at a select cancer conference and workshop because I had introduced a new understanding to this major health problem of our society. I scientifically explained why chronic unintentional dehydration is, in my view, the primary cause of pain and disease in the human body, including cancer. I explained that dehydration produces a drastic system disturbance in the physiology of the body and causes four major disruptions that ultimately and collectively allow for cancer formation and the invasive growth of the new tissue. My lecture was published in the September-October 1987 issue of the Journal of Anti-Cancer Research. You can retrieve this article from my website www.watercure.com. Further scientific information is available in my article Neurotransmitter Histamine, an Alternative Viewpoint, which was presented at the third Interscience World Conference on Inflammation in 1989. In September 2002, I was invited for the second time to highlight my understanding of dehydration and cancer formation in the body at the 31st Annual Cancer Control Society Conference in Los Angeles. The detailed explanations are too complicated for the scope of this book, but the highlights are as follows. Persistent dehydration causes a multi-system dysfunction in the entire physiology of the body, including 1. DNA damage in the cell nucleus. 2. Inefficiency and eventually loss of DNA repair system inside the cells. 3. Cell receptor abnormalities and loss of balancing processes of the hormonal control systems. 4. General immune system suppression even at the level of the bone marrow, causing lack of ability to recognize abnormal cells, the inability to destroy them, and loss of the filter system for removal of abnormal and primitive genes from the time refined and sophisticated gene pool in the body.
So again, dehydrations can cause lots of issues. Mainly it is detoxification. If you're really seeing the detoxing of the body system is a very important part of hydration.
In short, dehydration will gradually cause the body to lose its edge against the disruptive cascade of chemical combinations that constitute makeshift processes until the body gets back to its normal pattern of chemistry. You see, the body is a chemical refinery. It is the outcome of more sophisticated pattern of chemical reactions that depend on the adequate presence of water and naturally other food contained ingredients. If you shortchange it with the water it needs to maintain efficiency and run the myriad chemical formulas every second of every minute of life, you cause the creation of new chemical pathways that produce pain, disease, and premature death. Cancer formation is the outcome of a series of such chemical formulas and pathways to early death. 4 of these primary pathways have been mentioned above. The relationship of dehydration and DNA damage is easy to understand. Every cell has the tendency to produce some highly acidic byproducts from its chemical reactions.
So again, basically what happens is that metabolism, any kind of a reaction or development in the cellular system produces acid waste matter, which needs to be cleared out.
Water has the job of washing these acidic elements out of the cell and taking them to the liver and the kidneys to be processed. When there is not enough water to circulate to these cells, the acid the cells produce will gradually and eventually erode the fine and detailed transcription patterns in the DNA repertoire stored in the cell nucleus. In time, the erosions can become permanent and disruptive, causing aberrant cells with the power to reproduce. These types of cells are more primitive and are locked into uncontrollable reproductive patterns.
So this is what basically cancer cells are. They go rogue because of the environment that they are existing in.
For the benefit of those who want the scientific knowledge, in these cells, the protein kinase C of normal cells gets converted to protein kinase N, which is an autonomous and unstoppable smaller enzyme that continues to stimulate cell reproduction without regard for boundary limitations. This is why cancer cells develop bulky masses and lumps that encroach on the adjacent tissues and interfere with the tissue's normal functions.
So cancer cells, to survive, right, will draw energy and impinge on any other cell.
The DNA repair system is complex and many different mechanisms are involved. One of these involves a small enzyme that has been discovered to cut and splice faulty DNA replications and correct the mistake. The enzyme is composed of lysine tryptophan lysine, discovered by Claude Helene, who published his findings in 1985. As has been explained, dehydration causes a drastic run on the tryptophan reserves of the body. Not only may the body be short of tryptophan, but the delivery of the amino acid to the microscopically dehydrated areas may also be a contributing factor and may affect the quality control mechanisms for the DNA replication process.
So as mentioned before, right, not one cell in the body, including the skeletal cells, is renewed. I mean, it's not the same as 7 years back. So every and each cell in the body is replaced, replicated every 7 years, right? Now, if the replication process of the DNA, which is the basic central command center of every cell, is not replicated properly, then naturally it will lead to deformation. I think we can stop here. Let's stop here.